Hello and welcome to Mad Props. I'm your host, Chris Schnabel, and we've reached it. Episode number 40. We've gone through some name changes and some style changes, but we're still here, we're still running, and we're still going. Before we start the show, we have some big announcements coming from Schnabel Studios. So make sure you follow Schnabel Studios on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter to stay in the loop. If you missed it, check out our last episode with Julius Thomas III, aka Alexander Hamilton and Hamilton. It was one of the best episodes we've done in the first 39. I'm not going to spoil this one, but in the first 39, it's one of the best episodes we've done, in my opinion. And you don't want to miss it. So you can go check that out right now, anywhere you get your podcasts or on YouTube. There was also a new episode of Sketching Up, where we talked about the new Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers movie on Disney Plus. So make sure you go and check that out as well. And get in the conversation there. You can talk about what you liked about the movie, what you didn't like about the movie, or whatever you want to talk about there. Last, a brand new show, Southern Hospitality, will be joining the Schnabel Studios family of podcasts. It is hosted by the God himself, Kyle Scott. He'll be talking about hip hop, old and new, entertainment, and more. You don't want to miss out on this. It's going to be coming at the end of this month. So we're in June. At the end of this month, we'll be getting Southern Hospitality. So you don't want to miss that. Definitely stay locked into the channels. Make sure you get updates and notifications so you can get these when they first come out, and you can stay up and stay locked on the channel. Okay, let's do it. Let's get to the show. Let's get to the guest. Let's go.
Hi, I'm Scott Koblish. Let's start the show.
Scott, how you doing? How's it going? Thank you for joining us here on Mad Props. We appreciate you being here.
Yeah, sure, of course, anytime.
So we actually met before at the Spokane Comic-Con, the Lilac City Comic-Con is what it's called, because the show based out of Spokane, Washington, Go Zags. And my girlfriend and I, Mary, had you commission this beautiful piece of artwork sitting behind me now of me and her, completely accurate, by the way. I'm that chiseled. I had to show you before. I was like, make it this chiseled. And yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
And you made this. And we were talking before the show. This is one of my favorite things. I love being drawn. I love having that kind of stuff done. And once that happened, I turned to Mary and said, I need to get this guy on the show. I need to get him on. I need to talk to him. So, and here we are. It's happened. Yeah, I got you on. So we'll start by saying thank you for the piece. I love the piece. Thank you for the piece.
Absolutely. Well, it was a pleasure meeting you and Mary. Like you're both great. So I had fun drawing it, and I love Deadpool stuff. So Deadpool's always so flexible as far as like what you can and can't do with it. So
when we were walking away, I was looking at it, and she's like, "Oh, you really like it?" I'm like, "No, you don't understand. Like, he drew Deadpool. He was the artist for Deadpool."
Yeah.
Like, and then he drew us as Deadpool. Like, you don't understand what you're looking at right now. like
the artist, the meta aspect of it is intense. Yeah.
And it's like, it's nothing more Deadpool than it being someone else in Deadpool. It was great. I loved it. We were able to show you, I believe, the picture of us from Halloween with the dog as Deadpool, and the dog hated being Deadpool. But it's a great time. That was a great time. But you said that you had one more Comic-Con you were going to, and then you were going to kind of take some time. So is that something you do a lot? Do you tour Comic-Cons like yearly or anything like that?
Yeah, I wind up at a lot of different comic conventions all year long. Usually, well, so it depends. The pandemic obviously kind of threw a wrench into everything for the past couple of years, but I was doing anywhere in between, I want to say 5 and 12 different conventions during the year. So I'll probably there's one coming up in Stockton, California, and I don't know, everyone's trying to get me to go to Long Beach, so in California as well. So, and then things pop up like there are any international shows that they sort of ask me to do, I'm on board, because I love to travel and I love seeing different cultures and different places. And so for me, it's kind of it's a real gas to be able to go to. I don't know, last place I was at was we did Sweden this past fall, and Kuala Lumpur a couple of years before that. before all the travel was sort of slammed down.
Mhm.
That was the last convention I think I'd been at overseas. There was one in Spokane, or not in Spokane, and Spokane was on my mind. There was one that I had in Shanghai. So that was really cool. That was fun.
That's
So
close.
yeah,
Spokane, Shanghai. You were close. You were right
they're
there.
like the same thing. Yeah, it's almost nearly the exact same thing. Now Shanghai is gigantic, and that was a lot of fun. It was a great convention. I really enjoyed that one. Their convention halls are pretty similar all across the U.S. So that's the one kind of aspect that really feels the same each time out. Like you're at a table, and then you're in a like a convention hall, and they're pretty similar all across the world. So like the one in Sweden that we went to just this fall, like that was very similar. That had a lot of people at it actually, which was great. And then of course everyone in Sweden is super tall. So like normally I'm 6'2", so normally I'm used to being one of the tallest people in the room. There's usually a handful of people that are a little taller, but everyone was the same height or taller. Like it was just the average height there is off the charts. So it was kind of fascinating in that aspect of it. Like so I don't know. It's different parts of the world are different.
Yeah. So with Comic Cons, do they come to find you then? You don't like reach out to them, or if there's some that you like, you go like, hey, like, is there an open table?
It's a mix. Yeah, sometimes they'll know me and they'll know somebody who has access to me. They'll call me or text me or email me or something like that. But it sort of depends. So like some places I'll reach out to and like book a table. Um, but some of them will reach out to me. So it's a mixture of like, they want me to be a guest, or or if I just want to be at that convention just because I know and love that convention. Like the Long Beach one, I used to go to it every 6 months just because it was local and it's fun. So little things like that. It varies. Like Baltimore, when I was out there in the fall, was the Hero Initiative, which is a charity I do all sorts of stuff for, which helps out comic creators who have fallen on hard times. That charity asked me to come out to Baltimore, and I said, sure, no trouble at all. So there's little things like that. It varies from place to place, but I never thought, as an artist who just sits and draws at home, I never thought I'd be able to travel the world. So it's kind of it's a relief to be able to have more to my life than the 6 foot square around me at my desk and my walls.
Yeah, that's gotta be. I'm not an office person at all. We talked
Yeah,
before. I told you I do video. Like I need to be out. Like I need to be
yeah,
out and doing things. So like being able to tour like that must be so nice. You're like, I can get out of this box. I could do it. I
yeah.
can get out of here.
I can get out of the box. The language barriers are always kind of interesting, but they're not as bad as I thought that they would be. Oftentimes at the conventions, they'll have somebody who helps you like navigate everything. They'll have a handler for you. And honestly, some languages are easier for me to suss out than others. When I was in Sweden, reading things were surprisingly easy. Um, the language obviously is a little bit, speaking the language, I always feel a little self-conscious, but I was able to suss out like pretty much like, I don't know, like 3/4 of the words that I was looking at, like to find out what they kind of were. Because Swedish is kind of a mix between Russian and German and English, and everyone there speaks English because there's a big trade back and forth between Stockholm and England. So yeah, the only place I really ever ran into trouble was Italy. No one in Italy in this part of and in Naples, in Italy, and Napoli, they didn't want to speak English at all, and they were like, "Well, we'll speak French if we have to, but I don't know French." So that was tough. They dragged me up on stage and they were like, "Ba, ba, 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 ba," and I was like, "I don't know what it was happening." and they were like, parlez-vous français? And I'm like, je suis American. I don't really speak French at all, so and you can get around surprisingly easy in grocery stores. Everything has a picture on it, which I really didn't, you don't think about when you go to a grocery store. It's got the word and then the picture, so like yeah, that's pretty easy for you to figure out what's orange juice and grapefruit juice, and what kind of foods there are. And then honestly, like if you go to a bakery or something like that, you just point at things and you go like, I want 2 of those. So it's pretty easy to travel around it. I thought it would be way worse, because I'm not really that great at languages, but or at least I thought I wasn't. But I don't know, the traveling is just fascinating to me. Kuala Lumpur was really interesting because there's so much money flying in and out of that place, but it's so unregulated, so it's like the sidewalks are like just the worst, and then you'll have like just an abandoned lot with like tents on it, and then like a huge high rise that like everything on that property is well taken care of, but everything outside of it is kind of a chaotic mess. So it's interesting to see like different parts of the world. In Argentina, was it Argentina? Yeah, I think it was Argentina. And in Argentina was really interesting because that part of the world, like it's similar. The sidewalks are just the worst, but a lot of the buildings are really old. So like in Kuala Lumpur, the buildings were super new if there was anything, but the stuff in Argentina was like just sort of old buildings, like really beautiful old buildings everywhere. It kind of reminded me of Europe in some of the old architecture and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's really neat to be able to travel, especially for comic conventions. Everyone loves Deadpool all over the world. I can tell you that's something the rest of the world really loves is seeing Deadpool. So it's fun.
And you did Deadpool from about 2012 to 2018, 2019, something like that, right?
I came back to do like I don't know, it was like an 8-pager or something like that in the 30th anniversary for Deadpool. We did something last year, but yeah, I love the character. I thought it was really neat. Was you really can't break him as a character. He's he's kind of unbreakable. So like the things that you would do to him, like if you'd done them to Superman or Spider-Man, like everyone would immediately be taken out of the property. Like you if Superman turned to everybody and was like, "Hey everybody, how cool is it that I'm married to Lois Lane?" Like everyone would just be like, "Whoa, like this ruins the comic for me." But like
If you
if you
gave
do
him an
the
afro.
yeah, exactly. If you drew him in bell bottoms and put an afro wig on him, like it would kind of ruin the character. You wouldn't trust it anymore. And Superman's been through a lot, so like that's saying good for a guy that like was turning into all sorts of bees or whatever he would turn into in the 50s. But with Deadpool, it's you just can't break the character. Like the more we did with him that was ridiculous, like just the more everybody really loved it. Like everyone just was on board with all the silly stuff, and I got to do a lot of the silly stuff, so that was super fun. The comedy aspect of it is really interesting because there's not a lot of comics out there that even dive into comedy in any way. So and it's hard to do. You have to really make sure that like all the jokes are landing the best they can. It's easy to draw like a character who's like all roided out and like my wife was murdered, like that kind of thing. That kind of pathos or bathos is really simple and really easy to do, but comedy is hard. So
Yeah, and that's kind of what you did. I was going to talk about it a little later, but I'll get into it now with your newer one that you've been on, the secret history of the war on weed. You have this big, giant, macho fighting government lizards guy, but then you kind
yeah,
of turn him around because he gets a taste of the weed a little bit, and he's like, "Wait, this is wrong.
yeah.
Like this is."
Yeah, that was the fun thing to do on that one. We sort of reverse engineered that property. we had learned that there was a 420 release date for comics. Comics usually come out on Wednesdays, and there was a 420 release date, and we were like, we just put our heads together. We were like, what could we do with that? And it turned out like a lot of fun, and we're gonna do more of this stuff with that character, I think. Scotch McTiernan. So I'm just about to start. Once I wrap up this one comic, it's a monster comic. Once I wrap this up, I'm jumping into the Halloween special that we're gonna do. We're gonna do 2 more, so it'll be a Halloween themed comic and then a Christmas themed comic, and then I don't know. There's probably gonna be more after that. It's a weird time in comics. I think that the world is kind of ready for new properties, so
Different too. They're
yeah,
all following the same baseline now. Now, as much as I love the stuff like that, I understand like
yeah,
people are trying to break away from. I think that's why The Boys became so successful, because it was
yeah,
kind of breaking the mold of the superhero tropes.
yeah. Well, The Boys is it's funny that the Justice League is everywhere essentially,
Mhm.
but it's nowhere as well. Like, it's so funny to watch. Like, The Boys is a really successful Justice League. Umbrella Academy is a really successful X-Men. Like, it's just interesting to watch, like, Justice League and X-Men on the sidelines, while, like, honestly, some of these other properties like are just taking it and running it. You've got My Hero Academia, which is an amazing X-Men kind of thing, but X-Men is just nowhere to be found. So it's really fascinating to me to see like what's out there and what people do with it. The Scotch McTiernan stuff that we're doing, it doesn't really have a comic book parallel. So it's not like a Deadpool kind of thing. It's a little bit more like an 80s kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Van Damme or
Yeah,
Sylvester Stallone kind of thing.
I
So
got a Rambo vibe in the beginning with
yeah,
a Schwarzenegger look.
yeah. And then I wanted to make him like a redhead too, because you don't see that often. That there's a lot of redheads out there that are all like in superheroes and stuff like that. There's a lot of redhead girls, but not a lot of redhead guys. So I was like, let's go for this. And then it's just been interesting to do, like the more Brian and Jerry and I talk about it, the more fanciful it gets. Like the stuff with that's coming up is going to be really interesting, because we're going to do a one shot in for Halloween and a one shot for Christmas, and then package it all together for like a trade in the spring. So I don't know. It's just really fascinating to be able to do it. It's it's nice to be able to create things that you kind of have a lot of control over. Like, when you're doing an X-Men project or a Spider-Man project, or that's incredible fun, and I love doing it. But it does. You have parameters. You have limitations, and with the Scotch McTiernan stuff, we don't. We have to actually find out where our limitations are, and then figure those out, and figure out if those are even worth having. Like, so it's just interesting to do. So.
I think that goes back. You were talking about how the successful Justice League is The Boys. I think that's kind of why you see these properties like rising more than the original properties, because they have those boundaries, because they have those limitations. Like, you can make the Justice League, we want to see it, but make sure you stay
Yeah.
like this, stay in this lane, don't divert
Well,
from this lane.
yeah, because it'll ruin, like I said, it'll ruin the character. Like, it's funny to, like, Deadpool has such freedom, but like, yeah, if you were to do the stuff with the Boys, if you were to do it with Superman, you can't. I mean, in good conscience, you just can't. You could if you wanted to. I remember listening to some interview with or reading an interview with Grant Morrison, and he said that Superman's only weakness is how good the writer is. And I thought that was really clever. But the other thing is that you really can't make him a sociopath. Like, it really it dives into territory that would just it makes people uncomfortable. You know, they have a history with Superman that dates back 80 years, and to suddenly find out that that guy's a sociopath, it's a great story. It probably would sell a lot, but you would have, where does that go after that? You'd have to, you know what I mean? Like you really, you have to sit down and go like, yeah, we've got a year's worth of stories, but what's the next 80 years going to be like? So with the boys, you know, they have essentially this Justice League pastiche, you know, like where they can kind of dive into those archetypes. Like you'll have a Wonder Woman archetype, or you'll have a Flash archetype, and they can kind of like dive into like what it's like in particular patterns, you know, and fool around with that sort of the expectations that you have, having read the Flash for 80 years or however long it's been, and then to sort of run across a Flash character that you know, is struggling with their speed or their heart rate, or you know, they're having trouble with their metabolism. You know, that's really fascinating to be able to do something like that, but it's only a one-time thing in the in you know, in, you can do it outside of the Flash, but you can't really do it in the Flash. I do remember them bringing something in the 80s. They had a like Wally was just eating everything under the sun. Like he'd have to load up on like 80,000 calories, like in order to get through the day, which I thought was kind of interesting. But they kind of dropped that after a while. It's too much to watch the Flash just eating. Yeah, I think so. But at any rate, there's all sorts of things you can do with like you know, things like The Boys and My Hero Academia, and like you know, Umbrella Academy and stuff like that. It's just fascinating TV to watch. I'm kind of psyched about Umbrella Academy coming back, and I'm in the middle of The Boys now too. So although I might let an episode or two pile up, because I kind of like blowing through them.
Yeah, that's how I'm feeling too, especially so you're on the third season of The Boys. Yeah, so that's how I feel too. I watched the end of the episode. I'm like, just drop it, like just drop it all at once. I just want to sit in my room for 6.5 hours and watch them all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I don't need to keep coming back every week. Like, yeah, I get it. That's the whole point, is
that's
you want me to do that, but like,
yeah,
just drop it all at once. Let me watch it all at once. It's so crazy. Like this third season's been nuts so far.
Yeah,
and
it's been great. I really like just not knowing where they're going. You know, they'll set up stuff, they'll knock it down in ways that I didn't really think that they would do that, and then they're on to the next thing. So, you know, they're really like intense. It's I don't want to go into spoilers for anybody, but it's a really great season. So, and I'm really looking forward to Umbrella Academy. I love Gerard Way's like pretty much his entire output. So, and it's just really neat to see like all these really inventive like shows and inventive like movies and stuff like that coming out. So I think it's a kind of a golden age for intellectual properties right now. Like there just seem to be so many outlets for it, and everyone's pretty hungry for like a really well done show, or a really well done like thing. So I don't know. It's
yeah,
pretty cool.
I completely agree. Umbrella Academy, I love both The Boys and Umbrella Academy. One thing I love about both of them is the creative changes they've made with some of the stuff. Like they still follow pretty base of the beginning, but like especially Umbrella Academy is very different in the comic.
Yeah, I think the show is better than the comic, to be honest. But
honestly, for both of them, that's my opinion. I
yeah.
like the show much more than I like the comics, especially The Boys. For me, like I enjoyed Umbrella Academy. I really like Umbrella Academy.
Mhm.
I like the comic as well, but I also really love the show. I love the show more than but The Boys, like I like the comic, but I just never, I would read it and I never just got super into it. Where I just told you, I just wish they would drop the entire season of 3, because I would sit there and watch it for 6.5 hours.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I like the creative differences they took with it. I like how in The Boys they didn't start as Supes, and like it makes it more like regular people versus the Supes. Like how do they do it? How do they go against them? So I really like those creative differences.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah, I think that yeah, I found that some like movies are better than the book. or some shows are better than the book, or vice versa. The book's better than the movie or the show. It's tough to sort of transition stuff over, but with the Boys and Umbrella Academy, I think they did just a better job in general. Yeah, you have there's an aspect of like world building that like when you're doing it in a comic, you only have so much territory to really um, uh, go through, but you have time. Like you can build something up over a few years, and in a show, you've really got to rope people in at the beginning, and then put all the world building stuff up at the beginning too. I don't know. It's different for each property, each kind of thing. So, but yeah, I'm really psyched. There's all sorts of great stuff. I'm actually even looking forward to Black Adam.
Yeah.
I love the Justice Society, so it's weird to see Dr. Fate in anything. I never thought I'd see Dr. Fate in anything, much less like I think it's great casting to have Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate. So I'm hopeful about everything. You know, I think I think everyone's aware of what comics can do, and how to stretch it into different media. Like when I was growing up, like it was, you know, we'd have like a Spider-Man show on, or a you know, some sort of animated thing, and that was the closest you could get to any comic property, like superhero property, being engaging in any way. Some of the TV shows would just kind of fail on like weird levels. Like you'd have Reb Brown as like Captain America, or even there was a Captain America movie in the early 90s or late 80s that was just atrocious. So like you know, the fact that they've been able to pull some of these things to the point where when, you know, Chris Evans leaves the Captain America role, I think everybody misses him terribly, you know, like whereas I think that if you had that Captain America from the 80s or 90s as the Captain America that everybody as a linchpin was supposed to follow, I don't think it would have worked.
No, it's crazy to look. It's a great case study to do, like how the media of comic books became what it is today. Because if you think about comic books in the media, like outside of being comic books, it was like the Adam West shows or the old
Yeah.
Spider-Man cartoons from the 60s
Yeah.
going into the 70s, and how it had to be funny, it had to be quirky, it had to be. And then, you know, Batman 89 comes out, and Batman the Animated Series and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, it shows like, no, these could be like movies that are like good acting, good writing. Like they don't have to be comedies.
Yeah, they don't, and they can also dive into different things. Like one of my favorite movies from the Marvel stuff recently was Winter Soldier. I just loved all the espionage aspects of it. I wish that I had not known that Robert Redford was a villain. Like he'd spilled it like 8 months prior. Like
That's the
they
toughest
were
part
like,
with the Marvel movies. They spoil
yeah,
everything, but during the interviews.
yeah. They did an interview with him, and he was like, "It's so great to be a villain," and I was like, "Oh, you're killing me!" Like, because I would have, it would have blown my head off. Like, you know, there's a reveal in the thing, like where he just becomes like, you know, he's shown to be evil, and I was like, "Oh, this would have been so great if I had not known." But
So they
yeah,
hate Tom Holland, isn't it? Because every time he goes on an interview, he spoils what's going on next. They're like,
yeah.
no, Tom, stop. Don't even come to the interview anymore.
Yeah, I wish I had not known that the Hulk was in the Thor movie too. That Ragnarok one. I
Yeah.
wish I found out in the, you know, in the theater. So I don't know. It's just one of those things where like I guess they're trying to get people excited about going, but I also like I kind of miss being surprised. Like I used to be genuinely surprised about what happened in the comic books, like, but now you've got previews. Everyone has access to previews, and it's like literally like you know, 3 months like ahead of time. You kind of know what's going to happen, that some major death is going to happen, or the Justice League is all going to die and be replaced, you know, like stuff like that. Like I kind of wish that there was some surprise to things, but I don't know, maybe that boat has sailed, you know, it's so hard to tell.
now that you can see the covers, a
Yeah.
year in advance, and the cover art is like a tombstone of something. You're like, that person
Exactly. Yeah.
dies? What?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's pretty intense. But I don't know. I love comics. I love movies. I love all the superhero genre. It's kind of like when I was a kid, I would read all these old Norse mythology like books, and all these Greek mythology books, and even the Bible to some extent has like a whole bunch of like superpowered like characters running through it. So like it's really interesting to sort of like, it really gets your imagination all fired up and excited about like what you're reading. So I don't know, that kind of stuff always has a place, I guess. It's just people who are like just a little bit, they have some sort of gift or some sort of special thing, but it's also like a curse, or it's got some element of like beware of what you wish for kind of thing to it. um People are always searching around for things like that, all the old like what was it, 1001 like nights and stuff like that. Like it's fascinating to see the Arabian Nights. Every
Mhm.
culture's got the eight immortals over in China. Every culture has like people who are a little bit better at what they do, or they're like the epitome of what humankind can do. And then with that there's also the fall for that character sort of built in. So I
There's
love that sort of stuff. Yeah.
there's always been a media of like like people that hear the stories of blank and make it out to be more than it ever was. Like that's what you're
Yeah.
talking about. Something like there's always the like, and even when you are like in school, you think about it, you're in school when you were young, and there you heard, did you hear Billy? He beat up so and so. He threw him up against the wall, and didn't. But
Sure.
no,
Yeah.
all that
Yeah.
really happened is he pushed them, and
Yeah.
they got whatever. Like that's always what it's been. It's just these books that you're talking about, put it into writing, and now thousands of years, hundreds of years, thousand years later, we're looking at it and reading the stories of these people, and it's just like now
Absolutely.
comic
And
books, movies, it's all that's all it is the
it's
stories
the
of these
same
super
kind of
people.
stuff in like sports. There's a lot of like hero worship that like winds up in sports. I'll meet a lot of the wrestlers like at these conventions, and they're just genuinely sweet guys. They're nice, but it's fascinating to sort of like see some of these people that you see far away, and their stories are sort of built up in your head, and then you meet them, and it's just they're like a normal person,
Yeah,
you know. But
it's
you don't expect them to be, because you've got this storyline in your head about who they are, who they could be. So I don't know. It's interesting to watch. Yeah, because we definitely have. It's not just superheroes. It's sports or politicians, or like people build up politicians to be way bigger in their heads than they take up much more space than they actually do in real life. So it's just fascinating to me. The whole like people just have this natural myth making kind of ability. Like their imaginations just take over. Whether it's like a person that you're involved in a relationship, like you've seen it before, where like you'll see a couple, there'll be two friends, and like one person is just completely blind to what's going on with the other person. Do you know what I mean? And then you'll
mhm.
talk to them, and they'll have this sort of skewed view of like of who this person could be to them or with them. And it's like human beings just have this kind of like natural ability to almost screw it up. You know what I mean? To almost sort of say this person or this thing has an importance that I'm imparting to it that's much greater than like the importance that it would normally have. So so certainly superheroes, and certainly sports, politicians, girlfriends, boyfriends, husbands, wives. It's fascinating to watch that parents people have an expectation of their parents that I don't think that
Changes when you're 18. When
yeah,
you start
well,
learning about what they were like.
yeah, it changes, and it even continues to change as you get older too. Like as you reach each sort of mile marker, like your understanding of where your parents were at or where they must have been at changes, almost daily. So I think that it's just a weird ride. Like you just can't see everything all at once. So you're just kind of making up like connections between things, and then breaking them down and then remaking those connections. And it's fascinating as a lifelong process. I like getting older, like I really do. I've enjoyed, my perspective changing. I've enjoyed like the things that I think are important or I recognize are, harmful. Like it's that kind of stuff, like that really, like I feel like I'm constantly evolving and changing, and I really try and drive that home to my child as well, because Max, is 18, and I'm trying to get Max to think about like what the future holds. And even my experience, my parents and my uncle especially, like changed his entire life and entire career when he hit like 55. He was a chemist, and then he just decided that he was going to be a surgical assistant, and went to college for it and changed up everything. Like left New Jersey, went to Alabama to work in the ER. Like it's you can change your life. You can constantly shift things. Like my weight goes up and down. I constantly am shifting on that sort of stuff. Like it's just interesting to see how things change. I got divorced and remarried. Like that's a completely different relationship. Like, and it's wonderful. It's better in many ways, partly because of what I went through over the past couple of years. So like, um, everything is a process, and you don't have to get stuck in one particular thing. You can always shift things around. You can always um, make new connections, or even just going out and hanging out with friends can make a new connection with you, like where that wasn't there before. So like I love evolving. It's fun for me. So
With all this, I mean, so I'll give a quick synopsis here because we didn't really go through how you got to where you are, but I think I could give a quick synopsis. All right. I could give a quick synopsis of your life for the people
okay.
that are listening. Okay.
All right.
So you decided you want to be an artist at 7. You went to school a couple years after that. Then you went
Yeah.
to New York for for a school for visual arts.
Yep,
That
that's right.
then you made a portfolio there. You met John Romita Sr., where you were pestering him like, "Hey, let me in, let me in," and he's like, "All right, stop pestering me." A couple years later, he came back, he got you into Marvel, and then you went from there and you became an artist. And now here you are today. I think that's a good quick assessment, right?
That's a pretty great assessment. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess I've spoken to these things online before or something like that. Yeah.
It's
I
listen, it's not like oh, I'll just look it up and do it. When I do these, I do my research so I can get a because
that's a,
I don't need you telling that again. You tell that 1,000 times. Why do you need to do it again? But I draw a question out of that. So you started as an artist, you wanted to be an artist, but you have
yeah.
all these stories and experiences. Have you ever wanted to go into the writing side? I know like a lot of the artists, especially ones you looked up to, and we could talk about George Perez in a minute if you'd like.
Yeah.
But these guys became the writers after that. They became the storytellers. Have you ever wanted to make that transition to kind of like with these stories you can build, or do you just take these stories, put it into your art?
I feel like I'm kind of wandering toward that, but it's not as direct a path as I would normally imagine it to be. I've been struggling with figuring out how to write things. I have a project that it's kind of been on the back burner for the last couple months or almost a year now, and I've been trying to figure out how to plot it out and how to write it. And I think it's one of those things where it looks too big to me, and I have to kind of break it down into like things that I can kind of tackle. I'll tackle this, I'll tackle that. So that's a great question. I imagine so, that I'll probably wind up writing things. It's just it's like, for me, I'm like kind of a late bloomer in a lot of things. I kind of wind up like thinking about things way too much and for far too long. And then there'll be a big change, and then I'll go down that path. I think my strengths as far as storytelling go are growing. Like, I'm getting a lot better at like imagining things and being able to put that down on the paper, when I switched over from inking, inking was all well and good. It got me in the industry. I was pretty good at it. But I wound up frustrated, and I've gotten, I made a lot of changes to where I was at so that I was penciling things, and that was a big change. And it was me learning how to do that well enough that I'm comfortable with it, and then figuring, turning around and saying, now that I'm comfortable doing this, like, what do I want to do with it, and what stories do I want to tell? And I've gotten a lot of those under my belt, and now I'm sort of like looking at everything and saying, like, well, I'm comfortable drawing, I'm comfortable sort of like navigating making a comic, the ones that we do with Brian and Jerry, or the ones that I do with different writers and stuff like that. I'm comfortable making that process, and now I'm thinking of doing more stories that would be mine. But it's a slow process for me, and I've watched a lot of guys, like, they crash and burn. So like, I try and steer away from that kind of like shooting into the sky and then exploding, and then like just it being in pieces for the rest of your life. So like, I'm trying to figure out how to do it in a way that I can continue to make a living. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've only ever made a living drawing since I was 22, so I want to continue that process. So I don't want to fail horribly. Like, one of my worst, like, there's a kid's story that really haunts me to this day. The one with it's Jack and the Beanstalk. It's not the stuff where he gets to the clouds and he's fighting a giant. It's that stuff where he goes at the beginning and he's got a cow, and he takes the cow to market, and he comes back with like a few beans. Like, that's the kind of life I don't want to navigate. Like, yes, they're magic beans, but they could have well have been not magic beans.
Yeah.
So like, I want to be able to you feed your family, you have responsibilities as a father, you have responsibilities as a husband, and you can't forget those just because you want to draw comics. You know what I mean? Like, so there's that element of me always sort of like, navigating a career, and trying to make sure that like I'm doing things well enough that like I can balance the things in a good life. You know what I mean? Like, so anyway, I don't know. I probably rambled off in a
No,
corner.
that was good. That was good. I was just thinking when you said, and this is gonna be funny because you said all that stuff, and the first thing that comes to my head is when you said Jack and the Beanstalk. I was like, wouldn't it be hilarious to get the perspective of the guy that gave the beans to, hey, look, I just got this guy to 2 beans for this cow, and then he just sees the beanstalk going up in the background. He's like, what did I do?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
No, that's what came to my head for some reason after all that great stuff. I've been
checking. I never thought about that perspective. Yeah, he's like, I got a couple beans that I gave this kid for this.
Hey guys, I just screwed this kid over. I gave him a couple beans for this great cow here, and then he turns around. He's like, oh, yeah, hey, aren't those your beans over there, bud? Damn it.
Yeah, he could have planted them. Yeah.
That would be like the equivalent of you giving your comic and you getting 2 pennies, but the 1 penny is a 1682 from England, and you're like, oh wow, this is worth millions of dollars.
Well, that's not, a lot of these comic properties, because they wind up being movies or TV shows or whatever, there is an element of lottery that I don't like about it. Like, I'm kind of a work-a-day guy. Like, I kind of view my my work as like the page rate, you know what I mean? Or sometimes you'll get a royalty by surprise, but it's always the page rate. It's like doing the work every day and getting paid for the page. That I really understand on a deep level, but I don't understand that whole lottery system where somebody, winds up like Mark Millar, like, getting like a $50 million paycheck in order to have, what is it, Jupiter's Legacy and a couple other things like winding up on TV, so it's interesting to see like just how, because people do ride like a rocket, like they like a Rob Liefeld, like he gets on a rocket when he's like 20 and it just goes right into the stratosphere, same with Mark Millar. Like, I mean, I guess, there's always a lot of hard work involved in it. So I can't put it down that way, but like, there's some people that just rocket to stardom and other people that kind of like plod along. And I'm one of the plod along kind of guys, and I'm proud of it. I work really hard at learning and changing and evolving and doing what I can to be like the best artist I can be. So I don't know.
We have a couple more minutes, and I wanted to give you some time to talk about George Perez. I saw you were technically his last inker before he unfortunately,
I guess I was. Yeah, that's
passed.
a really good point. Yeah.
And that's kind of the guy that got you into being an artist. He kind of tried to emulate. He's one of the guys, I should say, that got you into artistry. So
yeah.
Any thoughts, anything you want to say? I just want to give you some time to talk about him and maybe a little
bit
what he meant to you.
Yeah, George. So it's funny. I mean, he just passed away, I guess, last month. George he was the real, there's a couple, like, I loved comic books and I would pick them up. But then after like a little bit of time, when you're a little kid, like 5, 6, 7, you kind of, there's a few that are forgettable. You'll pick up a couple hot stuffs or some Archie comics, and then they're kind of to me they were kind of all the same. But there were a few artists and a few writers out there that I would pick up the comics. I was surprised, engaged, and really like, just like, you really felt like they were presenting an entirely like an entire world to you, and in the month in between any of these comics, like, my imagination would just go, like, I would think about the cliffhanger and I would think about the world that they would be there, and I would draw that stuff on my own time. And a lot of it was George's stuff. Like, George is the reason I loved Firestorm, which, because there were these 8-page backups in Flash comic, or like, George is the reason I think all of us love the Teen Titans. The Teen Titans was, honestly, I kind of thought it was a bit of a garbage property like before, and then George came along with Marv and made it unreal. I mean, like, they've been making stories off of the stories that George and Marv initiated. They've been making those stories for decades now, and it's all the same characters, it's all the same like format, like it's all the same relationships that the characters have. And for me, like, so my first experience with George was just, he would present these stories and I would just eat them up. And then as an adult, like, I got to meet him, and he was just such a wonderful and kind person in person that also just kind of blew my head off. Like, there's a lot of anxiety that you have when you're at conventions, or you're meeting fans, or you're meeting other professionals. Any of the insecurities that you have are going to bubble up, and they can take different forms. People wind up being jerks, or they wind up being quiet, or any number of things can go wrong in your interaction with fans or other professionals. And watching George just be as kind and as happy and engaging and welcoming as he could be to every single person that he ever met, That was a real eye-opener for me. And it was one of those things where I was like, okay, you can be a good person, you can be a welcoming person and engaging, and just be a happy joy, a spot of joy for everybody that you meet. And so on a personal level, he was that for me. And on a professional level, watching him navigate his the career that he had, where he went from Avengers and Fantastic Four to over to DC to do some Justice League stuff and Teen Titans and Wonder Woman, and then coming back to going out and doing some independent stuff, like seeing how hard that was for him. I watched him really struggle with that independent stuff, like I guess Crimson Plague was not the success that he needed it to be. And then coming back to Avengers, and then going over to DC to do all sorts of stuff. Like it was fascinating to watch. And it gave me a bit of a blueprint to be able to follow. And then of course the last couple months, as soon as he fell ill and told everybody, I just jumped on the phone and was able to talk to him and tell him what he meant to me, on a personal level and a career level. And then I got to see him a little bit. Thankfully, my wife had helped to set up some of the final stuff that he did over at DC, so I was able to drive him back and forth to those events and talk with him and listen to him and see where he was at. It's when not a lot of people have that ability to sort of be present for everybody in their last days. And I watched George be able to do that for pretty much everybody who loved him. Like he was able to sort of wrap things up with a lot of people. And for me, that meant a lot. But it was just an interesting aspect of, someone's like Sherpa essentially for, their path towards, passing on, they're dying. So it was just interesting to see like that aspect of George's life be, he was so welcoming and he was so engaging and he was always telling stories, and for him to be able to help people have the last stories with him on a personal level was really interesting to me. So, I got to see him. He gave Jill and me some marriage advice, which was sweet. And then, I gave him a hug and then saw him off to the hotel there. Just before that, it was really interesting. We had gotten to see Warner Brothers has a tour, I guess, that they had sort of set up. It's been all sorts of screwy because of the pandemic, but there was a tour of all the properties that Warner Brothers kind of has under their hat right now, like Harry Potter and things like that. And there was an entire wing of this tour that's the DC properties, and it was really neat to see like those aspects of George's work in the movies, the movie stills, and they had like costumes and they had all sorts of things on the wall, like they'd have George's like Wonder Woman #1 cover or Cyborg, or like it was really neat to like look up at these comics, the covers of the comics that I had seen that George had done. And George was looking up at the comics, and he was excitedly, he's like, that was my first Green Lantern comic, like, and I was like, oh, that's really great. And and he's like, I got to meet Wally Wood and Jack Kirby on the same day. It was an amazing day. Like, just the fan aspect of it was just really wonderful to sort of share that with him, So, but yeah, he passed on. I guess we'll all pass on eventually. I think that in the end, really, it's what you leave for everybody that is the kind of stuff that matters in the world. Like if you've left stories that are engaging, or Jack Kirby is his stuff, Stan Lee, their stuff, like that's always going to be in the world. It just feels like it's just going to go and go and go. It like out. you build something that outlives you. I mean, that's kind of the goal, you know, like whether it's children or whether it's family or whether it's artwork or whether it's music or you know, some legacy that you can leave behind, and really make it mean something to people and that they can build on it. You know, that's really that's the gift that like defies death, you know. And I was really grateful to be able to tell George that those gifts that he gave to me, you know, are going to continue to live in me, and hopefully I'll be able to pass that on in some way. So anyway, that's what George meant to me. But
beautifully said. And it's amazing that you had that type of experience with him. Like, a lot of people don't get that. Like, you have someone that you looked up to, or someone that really helped you go onto your journey, and you actually got to have like this great, amazing experience all the way until his final days. So that's amazing. That's unbelievable, and it was really well said.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
Yep. Yeah. So as we wrap up here, I want to let you plug whatever you're going to plug here. You can find the secret history of the war on weed. You can find that wherever, I guess, comic stores or Amazon. I saw it on Amazon, so you can find it wherever. If you want to try to get that NFT one, you better have some good cash, because it's about 10 grand to try to get that one. But yeah, so that's where you can find that. Anything else you want to plug? Where can people find you as well on social media?
They can find me on Instagram. Is usually a good place to find me. It's Scott Koblish on Instagram. And right now we have The Secret History of the War on Weed is the book that's out right now. There'll be a monster comic that I haven't figured out what date that hits. And then definitely around Halloween, check out the next installment. We're not sure what the title is going to be. I want it to be The Secret History of the War on Halloween, but Jerry and Brian might have some different opinions. So yeah, but and definitely you know what else is coming out? It's a project I did during the pandemic. It kind of got lost in the weeds, just because they released it digitally for a while. But there should be a print copy of how to read comics the Marvel way, which I did all last year and was really proud of. So I'm hoping that it'll come out as a trade in September. So
keep an eye out for that one. And
absolutely,
you did one with DC too, right? Like how to draw DC, and now you're doing how to read with Marvel.
All over
the big guys there, huh? All over the big titans of comic books.
Absolutely. Oh, and I can't forget. There's a serial comic that I've been putting out. It's one story out of many in each issue of Heavy Metal as we go along for the next couple months. That's called The Axe. I'm actually doing that with Brian Posehn and Joe Troman, who's the lead guitar player in Fall Out Boy. So that's been a real gas. That's a lot of fun. So yeah, if you can find that magazine, Heavy Metal magazine, there's a storyline that's pouring through that one called The Axe. So and I think that's it. I always forget like things that I'm working on. So, but I think that's it for now.
Very busy. That's why we got to wrap it up so you can get back to all the stuff you're doing. You're doing so much. Yeah. We appreciate the time that you took with us to come and talk, and hope you had a good time doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope that everybody out there has a great day.
No problem. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching Mad Props with Chris Schnabel. I've been your host, Chris Schnabel. If you want to learn more about Mad Props or watch old episodes, go to youtube.com/Schnabel Studios. You can check it out there. You can also see Schnabel Studios on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So check us out there. Make sure you stay up to date. You can also interact with us. Thank you again for watching. Mad Props has been a Schnabel Studios production.